Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 4 of our distance learning. Today, you guys are going to complete your very first graded formative check. So today is probably the most important day we've had so far in distance learning because today's activity is a graded activity. So if all you've done up to this point is the warm-up journals every day, you really need to make sure that you sign on and complete this formative check today because this is what's going into our grade book. Today's learning target is for you guys to be able to analyze and explain the way a character develops or changes over the course of the story. So to do that, you're going to need a couple of documents. The first document you're going to need is the reading from day 3. This is the Emergency on the Mountain reading. In this reading, the other day you highlighted and annotated different examples of the methods of characterization used. You found an example of the way Anna looks, you found examples of her actions, and you found examples of her relationships. And you highlighted that information and annotated it in different colors as you read. So one thing I said about her actions is she's thinking to herself down here that she should be there, meaning she should be working with the other students, learning how to become a doctor. She feels like she should be there and that her sister Lita should have taken her with her. So this, I said, is an example of her actions because it's something she's thinking about. All right. At the end of the story, I said an example of her relationship is that she and Lita kind of seem close to each other here at the end of the story because Lita comes in and she talks about how she heard what Anna did for her friend that got hurt. And Lita seems really proud of her. And so I highlighted this in pink because I thought that this was an example of one of her relationships. So what you're going to do today is you're going to take your annotations and you are going to analyze the development of Anna over the short story by completing this formative check number 7. You're going to take your annotations and you're going to complete this activity by summarizing an example of what Anna looks like at the start of the story, summarizing an example of one of her actions, and summarizing an example of the relationship she has with some of the characters in the story, and then explaining how these methods of characterization help to develop those character traits that our characters have. Then you're going to briefly summarize in about 1 or 2 sentences the climax of the story. What is that event in the story that changes Anna? And how does it change her? Why is this changing her? And then finally, then you're going to analyze the methods of characterization at the end of the story. Again, you're going to find an example of her looks, an example of her actions, and an example of Anna's relationships, and explain how these develop character traits. And then the most important part of this assignment is you're going to talk about the character development and the way the character changes from the start of the story and the exposition to the resolution. And then you will explain that the character changes as a result of the climax. So why does the event in the climax change Anna? So taking your notes, you are going to analyze the methods of characterization used at the start of the story by talking about what does Anna look like, what are her actions like, what are her relationships like, what sort of traits do these things develop. You will summarize the climax of the story and explain why you think this is the summary or why you think this is the climax. You are going to provide, again, examples from the end of the story of Anna's looks, her actions, and her relationships, and then discuss how the character changes because of these events. There you have it. This is your assignment for the day. Remember, this is graded and it goes in the grade book today. If you have any questions, please come see me during my office hours from 2 to 3. The link again is at the very top of our distance learning folder if you have any questions. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.